Okay. Have you ever wondered what happens with extra eager developers who poke their nose into everything, who always provoke and question the management and their decisions, who ask the questions other team members don't dare to ask, but who are surprisingly sincerely interested in the well-being of the company? Apparently, a path often taken by those developers is a path that leads when they stop doing development and they enter some kind of management position. Hi, I'm Mislav. I'm developer, team lead, gun for hire. I'm professionally in the IT industry for about 10 years. During that period, I've changed several companies, and the mic is too close. I've changed several companies and even more teams. I came here to talk about team leadership, a position I was proud to hold in several of those teams. And I also came here to admit that most of the time I was lost, and most of the time I had no idea what I was doing. I'm a person that always tries to face my fears, so every time I get a chance to do so, to look fear in the eyes, I jump in on that. Such was, for instance, this chance to speak in front of this auditorium. Just one more thing I know nothing about in a long line of me doing the shruggy. With zero formal training, relying on my intuition and various random pieces of advice I picked up from people way smarter than me, I've more or less successfully led my teams to their goals. And on that path, I've learned tremendously, improved myself and hopefully my teams. I would like to share with you today some advices I wish someone told me before embarking down this path. The Peter Principle states that people in structures, especially in corporate structures, tend to rise through promotion until they reach their level of incompetence. So in other words, every time you get a promotion, and this is especially true for major promotions, you're on the edge of being capable to do your job properly. Up till now, you're an expert in your field, and now you'll probably wonder, am I ready for this? And maybe you are, maybe you're not. But if someone thinks so, and if you're conscious enough that you know the weight of this decision, I just say, jump in on it. You will never feel 100% certain, and if you did, it wouldn't be on the edge. It wouldn't be a challenge. Being a lead is not in any way or form a new upgraded version of the job you had before. It's almost entirely new job. You're still within the same business domain, but outside of your safe zone. You have to take care of new roles you're not prepared of. First one is a familiar one, but now it's got a twist. I'll start this one with a story. I got hired to work with one company and to lead the development team. I struck the deal with the management to do like 20% time spent on team management stuff and 80% on development. I'm just going to move this over. So yeah, okay. So the deal was I'm going to spend 20% on team management and 80% on development. And that kind of deal sounded dreamy to me because I can still do what I'm good at and play around with this team leadership stuff. 1 month in, I wrote 4 lines of code. So be prepared for what you're getting yourself into. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad thing, it just was something that I wasn't expecting. The bigger the team, the bigger the project, less time you're going to actually spend writing code. You need to realize that you're not a code monkey anymore, Now you're the architect, the decision maker, the organizer, and more than everything, probably the reviewer. You're placed in this position to produce more code than ever, just not by yourself anymore. So if you're not creating the code, who is? Which leads us to hiring. For the first interview I was in, I explicitly asked to be included. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? And soon my wish was granted. And worst thing happened. I don't know who sweated more, the guy in front of me or me. And when I'm nervous, I drink a lot of water. So, at the beginning of the interview, my colleague from HR asked the candidate if they would like something to drink. And I was just blinking at my colleague, trying to say, bring me a bucket because I'm gonna die. I was worrying not to look like a total tool in front of the candidate. And I probably spent more time thinking how I look, how I appear, instead of actually listening to the candidate. In my head, it was a mess. But after a while, unfortunately, a few interviews, because you know how it goes, several interviews in a day, and you have no idea what you're doing most of the time. I realized that I don't need to sound like the smartest person in the room. The candidate does. So why not help them with that? I became the good cop. I started to nod along to their explanations, saying stupid jokes, or just going like me too, nodding along to their stories. I tried to make this formal talk as informal as I could. By reducing the pressure on the candidate, I got a more honest face of their way of thinking. And after all these years, I have one golden rule that I'm never breaking when I'm actually thinking of hiring someone and when I'm actually talking to someone is don't be an ass. Tech can be taught, but I can teach you what kind of person you should be. And this is the kind of, my honest face method, trying to get the feelings of that person is trying to weed out those who are incompatible. But that is a problem because I'm not very good at reading people. Sometimes I'm over-optimistic, sometimes it's a bad day and everybody sucks. So when it comes to human interaction, sometimes I'm like deer in headlights. And interviewing for me, and I believe for most of the people, just doesn't come easy. It's a skill that improves with practice. But this is trial and error in production, and we as developers, we try to avoid this. We all done it, but we want to avoid it. But in this instance, you can't. So we devised a plan where I actually spend a lot of time preparing for the interviews. I try to do background research on the candidate and I make a bunch of questions. I make whole trees of questions and possible answers, possible pathways where this conversation might lead. All that to have smooth back and forth with the candidate. Most of the questions aren't even touched and that's okay. You assume that the candidate took time to prepare, so it's only polite for you to do the same. And so you hire someone, they're great until they are not. This is the other side of the coin, the side that a lot of people are not talking about. Luckily, I only had to do it once, and I don't even know if there is a way to do it gently. And you should think of termination just as a last resort solution. Make sure you've exhausted all options before that. In your regular reviews, make sure you also give negative reviews if they are necessary. Sometimes people act in certain ways or do certain things just because that's how they did it before. Maybe they want to change, but they don't know that they have to change. Make sure you fire a few warning shots before actually pulling the trigger. Sometimes nothing helps and you actually do it, but in that moment, don't think about the person that actually was fired. You need to step in and think of the team members who are actually left behind. You need to be the first person who tells your team members why it happened and why it happened. Such info needs to come from you, and if you wait too long, it's gonna come from the other side, and then you're risking to not be able to tell your side of the story. So back to the happy topics, where you've hired some people, got some people assigned to your team, and hopefully you fired none. And when I first started to being a team lead, I did one thing extremely wrong. I was being the senior developer there, the most senior, and I wanted to work on the fun, complex stuff myself. Of course, that backfired. It came from a kind of selfish place, but also where I wasn't trustworthy enough. Of course, I became the bottleneck of the problem, the bottleneck of the whole project. I was the one assigning issues, I was also the one delegating issues, but also trying to review them, but also the one who tried to do the most complex stuff myself. And it was a vicious cycle. Well, I just kept piling more work upon myself when there were actually people, other team members that actually could do this. So listen to your team members and ask them what they want to work on and accommodate them if you can. Get to know your team members and their strengths and weaknesses and give out tasks accordingly. Work on your sixth sense to move people into new directions. Sometimes people just don't know that something is an option for them to either explore or work on. Try to read your team's inner dynamics and see who works best with whom. Fortifying existing relationships and encourage new ones. It can only benefit you and the company as a whole. In extreme situations, you're the one whose only task is triage. There is no time for discussion, and you need to make quick decisions that will make on the spot best possible outcome, who will deal with the issue at hand. And when you do that, don't ping your team members non-stop. Don't throw new logs to this trash pile that is happening. Let them do what they do best and solve problems. For me, either everyday delegation or delegation in emergency creates a very weird feeling because I'm in control, but I don't directly control anything. I'm responsible for everything that is happening with a project, but I don't directly do anything tangible. Success of my job is solely based on the success of my team members. And that can be scary. I sometimes find myself thinking, people are the worst, which is a horrible notion if you actually manage people, but sometimes it happens. For instance, let's call this a theoretical example. You have a breach in your production database, a hacker demanding ransom, and the developer actually set up that database just the day before. Just when this is all happening, decided that it's time for his haircut and gets up and leave. It's hard to love the whole humankind at that moment. But with a good team, a team you trust, another thought comes to mind that people are the best. And people love to shine, people love being heroes, and people want to do the work they can be proud of. So be the Alfred to your Batmans, be Jarvis to your Ironmans, and clear the road in front of them. And let them work. Open the doors for your team and trust them. And trust is something that is largely built through communication, through everyday communication, be it async communication or person-to-person directly. Have regular one-on-ones. You can have them scheduled or not. In my experience, scheduled works better. It gives your team members time to prepare. They know that it's this time of week or month or whatever. They can make a list of what they want to talk about. And usually, if you don't have it scheduled, it's probably not going to happen at all. Just don't do it too often and don't let it run for too long. And think that this one-on-one's worth both ways. You're also the one who needs to be honest there and prepared to be vulnerable and let your guard down and show your true face. You want to show the human side of you and not just this strict team lead that only wants to make sure that everything is done and that's it. After all, that is what you're also hoping to get from your team members. With group meetings, learn how to lead and moderate them. You can actually do this even before you're in this kind of position. Some time ago, I was in a team meeting. In this team, I was just a regular dev. It was actually like a flat structure company. Everybody was just a dev. So I was in a conference call. It was a remote team, so you do it via Zoom or whatever. I had my wireless headphones on, and all of a sudden, after like half a meeting, just these two developers started to talk about something that's clearly only interesting to them, something that doesn't touch the rest of the team whatsoever. So I very subtly just turned off my camera. I'm already on mute, and just went to make a cup of tea in the kitchen. I have my wireless headphones on, I can still hear them. Okay, got back with the tea, set it down, and it's home office, so there's always something in my living room. So I folded the laundry. I put another load of laundry in the washing machine. I can still hear them, they're still going on. And everybody else is just on mute and their camera's off and nobody cares. I did the dishes. I cleaned out some leftovers from the fridge. And when I was just looking around to do what to do next, maybe looking for the vacuum, the guy started to say goodbye, and thank God it was over. And even before that, and especially after this kind of things, I made one rule, and if somebody in a meeting is talking in a very specific thing for longer than like 2 or 3 minutes, just stop it. Just say, either stick around after the call and make a separate meeting or anything, just don't delay the whole team. Developers hate meetings, especially hate meetings they get nothing out of. Another useful advice I picked up along the way, this is also true for remote meetings, but also on-premise meetings, is to capture meeting decisions and share them afterwards as too long did not read documents. You can either just do it, send an email, or have a wiki page somewhere, have a, I don't know, whatever, put it in a Slack channel. The idea is that you create a paper trail of decisions and action items. If a meeting doesn't have some sort of decisions or action items afterwards, if nothing is happening after that meeting, it was wasted time. With this paper trail, you give also other team members a chance and other members in the actually whole company to see the updates easily. One bonus tip I actually picked up from a client I worked in the past year. is that they tend to start a group meeting with a totally random question. And that random question can span from which animal describes you today to what's the weirdest thing in your refrigerator right now. It's intended to be as an icebreaker, and people will always say something funny, and you get this instant cohesion, instant general, like we're talking about the same thing, which is the mindset we want to have for the whole meeting. And we get out of the box cohesion. As a good leader, you need to recognize and magnify the accomplishment of your teammates, and praise accomplishments are a powerful tool that you can use to boost your team mood and engagement. Celebrate progress, but that doesn't mean handing out silly participation trophies for every little single thing. Use the power of compliment only when there is something tangible to compliment, and don't force it. It will start sounding insincere. But also don't focus on the big things and things that only visible on the outside. People are every day working on things that are happening in the background and that they are not on the forefront of the product, but are still important. Small wins that move the product forward are the things you're looking for here. Well, there are many more things that I haven't touched today, but this is a very short talk. It's a 25-minute slot. So I would just like to take with you, that you take with you home today some final pieces of advice. As with the previous developer role, you need to continue learning new skills. And I'm guessing if you got to this position, you're obviously good at learning. You just need to replace what you're actually learning. Trust is something that I cannot emphasize enough. The same way you need to trust people, you need to earn your people's trust, and this will take time. It won't happen overnight, and it will take months for you to move a few steps forwards, but always have in the back of your head that going backwards is extremely easy, and so be careful how you communicate with your team members. Often you're the one who is protecting the team from higher forces, be it some C-level executive, C-level management, or just angry clients and customers. And it's your job to feel your team safe. Either they don't want to touch that part of the business, they don't need to. And you need to continue asking those questions people don't dare to ask and don't want to ask. Don't avoid hard discussions and decisions. Be open about them with your team, and if you can, democratize decision making. You have a whole group of people who are actually experts in their field, so use them. Make everybody feel included and encourage discussion, but know when to end. I'm Mislav, and this was On the Edge of Leadership.